The historical centre of St. Petersburg, the Moscow Kremlin, and the Kizhi Church ensemble are the architectural symbols of Russia. These unique objects are an embodiment of Russian culture, of its variety and unity, its might and its subtlety, its unique character and coherence with tradition. Each of them is recognized as a masterpiece of human creative genius. They were the very first Russian objects added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1990. St. Petersburg was the capital of the Russian Empire. It's the only place of its kind and an ideal realization of the European grid plan town concept. Surrounded as it is by palace and park ensemble, placed in perfect harmony with the natural landscape. A city built according to a careful plan and in a short time, as well as in difficult climate conditions. Bogginess, a permanent flood threat, cold and moist weather has turned into a visual embodiment of the historical period governed by Tsar Peter the Great. It was built as the capital of a new state, as a model city for the renovated Russia. St. Petersburg played a key part in the country's modernization in the 18th century. Here were placed the residences of the Russian emperors, the newly established Academy of Science, Academy of Fine Arts, the largest museum in Russia, the Hermitage Museum, as well as the first Russian railway line that was laid between St. Petersburg and Tsarskoye Selo. The cultural landscape of St. Petersburg and its surroundings is unique. Different historical periods and different styles of architecture, ranging from Baroque and Classicism to modernism and constructivism, provide the city and its suburbs with great visual diversity. Nevertheless, the historical appearance of the city centre of Russia's northern capital remains intact and authentic. Its primary virtue is in the harmony between nature and architecture. The city has witnessed and participated in many great and tragic historical events, such as the revolutions of February and October 1917, and the heroic fortitude during World War II in the Leningrad blockade, which took nearly 1 million lives. Having gone through the unprecedented challenges of the 20th century, the city remains symbolic and fundamental to Russian culture, education and science. St. Petersburg has been an inspiration to great Russian scientists, writers, musicians and performing artists. The Moscow Kremlin and Red Square constitute the center of Moscow, the old capital of the Muscovite princes, the Russian Tsars, the Soviet government, now the President's residence. Behind the Kremlin walls there is a unique range of architectural masterpieces and treasures of art from different times. There are great cathedrals, the Cathedral of the Annunciation, the Cathedral of the Assumption, the Archangel Michael Cathedral, the bell tower of Ivan the Great. There are gorgeous palaces, the Grand Kremlin Palace, the Terem Palace, the Palace of Facets. Among the famous buildings there's St. Basil's Cathedral situated in Red Square. Its harmonious look with the visually stunning, colourful domes, its effect of verticality and the old galleries make it one of the most recognised architectural objects in the world. The Kremlin, together with its circle of walls, enriched with the 5 gates and 29 towers, resembles what used to be the old wooden grad, established by Russian Prince Yuri Dolgoruki, approximately in the year 1156, on top of a hill next to the Moskva River. Later partially rebuilt in white limestone by Prince Dmitry Donskoy, and once again by Grand Prince Ivan III, the Moscow Kremlin became a striking example of a defensive installation that can be found at the core of many old Russian towns. the Moscow Kremlin became the birthplace of various new forms of Russian architecture. The numerous cathedrals, towers and chambers are heavily influenced by the Italian Renaissance. This can be seen in the features of the Cathedral of the Assumption, built by the architect named Fioravanti, and in the features of the Palace of Facets. In the same period, using the methods of Milano engineering, the Kremlin towers were built by the architect Solari. Most of all, the Renaissance reflected upon the classical capitals of the Archangel Michael Cathedral, built at a time when Moscow is the Third Rome idea turned official. Beginning in the 13th century, the Kremlin became the arena for the most significant events in Russian history. Here the Tsars were crowned, planned their military campaigns, held courts, issued edicts, and eventually passed away. In the 20th century, Moscow again became the capital of Russia, instead of St. Petersburg. Here the Soviet government was situated. Here the key political figures of the USSR were buried. On Red Square, one can see Lenin's mausoleum. Currently, the Moscow Kremlin, as before, is the very center of Russia's political administration and home to the residency of the president. Nevertheless, many of the Kremlin buildings are open to visitors. Many people in Russia consider the Kizhi Pogast to be the eighth wonder of the world, as it is an entirely unique artistic achievement of Russian wooden architecture. The Kizhi church ensemble, as well as the other buildings on the Kizhi island, are exceptional examples of the carpentry tradition of the Russian north. Russian carpenters, renowned most of all for medieval Novgorod, reached the highest point of their artistic craft when they built the two magnificent churches with multiple domes and a bell tower next to each other. The unusually designed, ideally proportioned wooden buildings beautifully organize the island's environment and fit harmoniously with the surrounding landscape. The pogast was the central administrative unit of Karelia in the 13th to 14th centuries. The term pogast had two meanings. The word was used to describe the place where the churches were built, along with a graveyard, but it was also the name for the administrative district, a united group of villages. The churches were built right into the center of the district. The Kizhi Pogast, composed of the summer Transfiguration Church and the winter Intercession Church, is a striking example of the building group typical for a sparsely populated region of medieval Orthodox settlements. In such settlements, preachers were confronted with the challenge of working across the widespread Christian communities in tough climatic conditions. The traditions of the Russian peasants' self-government, their carpentry craft and their Christian culture were partially lost in Soviet times. Today, with the help of the museum preservation area Kizhi, along with the proactive attitude of the local people, they're being restored. "25 years is a quarter of a century. One might say that it's a brief period for buildings with many centuries of history behind them. However, each of them requires care and protection. In these 25 years, under the auspices of UNESCO, on numerous occasions, extraordinary Russian memorials were carefully restored using state-of-the-art technologies. The museums of St. Petersburg and of the Moscow Kremlin are among the busiest in the world, while Kizhi has often been awarded top places among international restoration competitions. In December 2015, an exhibition will open in St. Petersburg, devoted to the history of various buildings, as well as the activity aimed at their preservation and popularization.